Maya was skeptical when Michael told her about the meeting. "Anna Wintour. She's declined every request we've sent to Vogue." "That was before I spoke to her directly," Michael replied. "We have one shot to change her mind." For the next 5 days, the team worked frantically to prepare their presentation. Michael insisted on showing Anna not just the FlexForm technology, but how it could transform everyday clothing into something revolutionary. "She needs to see the full vision," he explained. "Not just athletic wear, but a complete wardrobe reimagined." The morning of Anna's visit, Michael arrived at the studio at 6 a.m. to ensure everything was perfect. The space had been transformed. Clean white walls featured just 5 garments: a man's suit, a woman's dress, casual wear, evening wear, and athletic apparel, all created with FlexForm technology. At exactly 9 a.m., Anna Wintour entered the studio. Even in Chicago, she was impeccably dressed in a Chanel suit, her signature bob haircut perfectly in place, large sunglasses covering her eyes. "Good morning, Ms. Winter," Michael greeted her. "Thank you for coming." "Anna, please," she replied, removing her sunglasses to reveal sharp, assessing eyes. "And thank you for intriguing me enough to detour from my schedule." Michael introduced Maya and the core team briefly, then got straight to the point. "Everyone thinks I'm just another celebrity slapping my name on clothes. That's not what this is." Anna said nothing, waiting for him to continue. "I created this company because I saw a gap between how clothes are designed and how bodies actually work." Michael gestured to the garments displayed around the room. "These all contain technology that changes how fabric moves with the body." "Show me," Anna said simply. Michael guided her to the first display, a business suit that looked conventionally elegant. "This appears traditional, but watch." He put on the jacket and moved through a series of athletic motions that would typically cause a suit to bind and restrict. The FlexForm fabric responded perfectly, moving with him rather than against him. Anna stepped closer, her interest visibly piqued. "May I?" she asked, touching the sleeve. "Please." She examined the fabric carefully, her expert fingers testing the texture and stretch. "The hand is remarkable. It feels like fine wool, but moves like something entirely new." For the next 20 minutes, Michael and Maya demonstrated each garment, explaining the technology without overwhelming her with technical details. Anna asked pointed questions that revealed her deep knowledge of textile construction. "And Antoine has seen this?" she asked, examining the evening gown that incorporated FlexForm in ways that allowed unprecedented freedom of movement while maintaining structure. "No," Michael admitted, "but he's been actively working to ensure no one else sees it either." Anna's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. "Antoine has always been protective of his position. He publicly humiliated me in Paris," Michael said, "claimed I'd never understand fashion." "And that motivated all this?" Anna gestured to the collection. Michael considered his answer carefully. "It started that way, but it became something more. A chance to truly innovate, not just put my name on something." Anna walked slowly around the studio, taking a second look at each piece. The 30 minutes had stretched to 45, but she showed no sign of leaving. "You know what I find most interesting, Michael?" she said finally. "You could have created athletic wear with your name on it and made millions without any of this research and innovation. That would have been the easy path." Michael nodded. "Easy has never interested me." For the first time, Anna smiled slightly. No, I suppose it hasn't. She put her sunglasses back on. I've been watching you for years, you know. Watching me? Michael asked, surprised. Not your basketball career, though that's been impressive. I've been watching how you've approached business, branding, your shoe line. You've shown remarkable taste and determination. She paused. And now this, which shows vision. Michael waited, not quite daring to hope. The fashion world needs disruption, Anna continued. It's become too insular, too self-referential, too afraid of outsiders. She reached for her purse, a signal she was leaving. Send your lookbook and technical materials to my office, and we'll need exclusivity for the reveal. Michael couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. You're interested in featuring the collection? I'm interested in featuring innovation, Anna corrected him. My September issue closes in 3 weeks. That gives you time to perfect your presentation. The September issue, the most important fashion magazine edition of the year. Michael understood the significance immediately. Thank you, Anna. I won't disappoint you. See that you don't. She headed for the door, then turned back. One last question. What made you call me? Michael smiled. You're the only person in fashion whose opinion matters more than Antoine Belmont's. Anna's lips curved slightly. Flattery, Michael? That seems beneath you. Not flattery. Strategy. In basketball, you need to know who the real power players are. This time, Anna laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise even her. Well played. She put her hand on the door. Antoine has created many enemies over the years with his arrogance. He just made his biggest mistake by trying to keep you out of the industry rather than learning from what you're bringing to it. After she left, Maya turned to Michael, eyes wide. Did that just happen? Did Anna Wintour just offer us the September issue? Michael nodded, allowing himself a rare moment of celebration. We still have a lot of work to do before the feature, but we just got our foot in the door. He smiled at his team. And once I get my foot in the door, you never let it close again, Maya finished, knowing his reputation for relentless determination. With Anna Wintour's unexpected support, everything changed. The most powerful voice in fashion had seen something in Michael's vision that transcended the boundaries between sports and style. Now they just needed to prove her right. The September issue of Vogue arrived at Michael Jordan's Chicago home with a special messenger. Michael stared at the cover for a long moment before opening it. Inside was an 8-page spread featuring Jordan Beyond's debut collection. Anna Wintour had written the introduction herself. Innovation rarely comes from where we expect it. The most exciting developments often emerge from outsiders who see possibilities the experts have overlooked. Michael Jordan has created something truly revolutionary with Jordan Beyond. Not merely clothes designed by an athlete, but a fundamental rethinking of how fabric interacts with the human body. The fashion world's reaction was immediate and divided. Some editors followed Anna's lead, praising the innovation. Others remained skeptical, suggesting the Vogue feature was merely a publicity stunt. Now comes the real test, Michael told his team during a meeting at their Chicago studio. We need a launch event that proves this is more than hype. New York Fashion Week starts next month, Maya suggested. We could secure a slot. No, Michael interrupted. We're not playing by their rules. He unfolded a map of downtown Chicago and pointed to a location. We're doing it here, in my city. Chicago? One of the marketing executives questioned. but all the major fashion critics and buyers will be in New York. Then we'll give them a reason to fly to Chicago, Michael Fayuntry replied confidently. We're not just launching clothes, we're launching a new category. The team selected the Field Museum of Natural History for the event, a space not typically used for fashion shows. Michael insisted on a different approach than traditional runway presentations. Fashion. Shows are always the same, he explained. Models walking stiffly in a straight line. How does that show what our clothes can actually do? Instead, they designed an experience that would showcase the FlexForm technology in action. Professional athletes from various sports would be their models, demonstrating how the clothing performed during actual movement. We're not selling an image, Michael insisted. We're selling performance you can see. As preparations continued, word of the unconventional launch spread through the fashion industry. Critics prepared to dismiss it as a gimmick. But when invitations went out, elegant black cards with embossed silver lettering, the RSVPs flooded in. No one wanted to miss what Michael Jordan was planning, even if only to critique it afterward. What many didn't know was that Michael had personally called influential retailers, athletes, and celebrities, asking for their support. Few could refuse the man whose competitive spirit had become legendary. 2 weeks before the launch, Antoine Belmont finally broke his silence about Jordan Beyond. In an interview with French Vogue, he dismissed the collection sight unseen. Athletes should stick to sports, he said. This so-called technology is merely marketing for what will undoubtedly be mediocre clothes with a famous name attached. Michael taped the quote to his office wall, adding it to the collection of doubtful statements that had fueled his career. The morning of the launch arrived with perfect early spring weather. The Chicago skyline glittered against a clear blue sky as staff made final preparations at the Field Museum. Michael arrived early, walking through the space before anyone else arrived. The Grand Hall had been transformed. Instead of a traditional runway, they had created a series of environments where models would demonstrate the clothing in action. A basketball court, a dance floor, a business meeting setting, even a simulated rainstorm where waterproof FlexForm garments would be tested live. It's perfect, Michael told Maya as she joined him. How are the models doing? Nervous but ready, she replied. Using real athletes instead of professional models was brilliant. They understand what we're trying to show. By evening, limousines and luxury cars lined the museum entrance. Fashion. Critics from New York, Paris, and Milan arrived with carefully neutral expressions. Department store buyers came with skepticism but open checkbooks. Celebrities and athletes showed up to support Michael, many wearing early samples from the collection. From a private room, Michael watched the crowd gather on monitors. He spotted several designers who had publicly mocked his entry into fashion. They were here to witness what they expected would be his failure. "Mr. Jordan," said an assistant, "we're ready to begin when you are." Michael nodded and adjusted his tie. He wore a FlexForm suit in midnight blue that looked like traditional fine tailoring but allowed complete freedom of movement. "Let's change fashion forever," he said, and walked toward the main hall. The lights dimmed as Michael took center. Stage. Camera flashes illuminated his face as he addressed the crowd. "Welcome to Jordan Beyond," he began. "Many have asked why a basketball player thinks he can create fashion. Tonight isn't about convincing you with words. It's about showing you something new." Instead of a traditional opening, the event began with a video playing on massive screens. It showed people of all types struggling with their clothing. A businessman whose suit restricted his reach, a mother whose dress limited her ability to pick up her child, an elderly man who couldn't fasten complicated buttons. Clothes should serve the people who wear them, Michael's voice narrated. Not the other way, around. The screens went dark, and then the show truly began. From different entrances around the hall, athletes emerged wearing Jordan Beyond designs. But instead of walking a runway, they moved naturally, playing basketball, dancing, running, stretching, all while wearing clothing that looked sophisticated and high-end. Olympic gymnast Dominique Dawes performed tumbling passes in an elegant dress that moved perfectly with her body. NBA players demonstrated business suits by executing basketball drills. Ballet dancers leapt and spun in evening wear that flowed with their movements rather than restricting them. The audience watched in amazement as clothing they expected to tear or bind instead moved like a second skin. When a model wearing a flex-form raincoat walked through actual falling water and emerged completely dry, audible gasps filled the room. Michael joined the final presentation, stepping forward with his core design team. He removed his jacket and performed his famous slam dunk leap while wearing formal attire. The crowd applauded spontaneously. "This is Jordan Beyond," Michael said as the lights came up. "Clothing engineered for how people actually live and move. Technology that serves style, not replaces it." He gestured to the athletes who had modeled the collection. "These aren't just clothes for professional athletes. They're for everyone who has ever felt restricted by what they wear. Everyone who believes function and style can exist together." As the event transitioned to the reception, the real test began. Fashion critics examined garments up close. Department store buyers asked about pricing and availability. Celebrities placed personal orders on the spot. Michael moved through the crowd, answering questions and accepting both compliments and criticism with equal grace. When he spotted a group of fashion editors huddled together, looking impressed, despite themselves, he knew they had succeeded. Maya found him near the end of the evening. The Neiman Marcus buyer just committed to carrying the full collection in all stores, she said excitedly. And Bergdorf's wants exclusivity in New York, but I told them we're already committed to broader distribution. Michael nodded, pleased, but not surprised. He'd seen this pattern before, initial resistance followed by enthusiastic acceptance once people experienced the product firsthand. "What about Belmont?" he asked. "Any word?" Maya's expression turned serious. His assistant came, left halfway through. Didn't look happy. Michael smiled slightly. The battle wasn't over, but the first victory was theirs. Jordan Beyond had officially launched, not as a celebrity vanity project, but as a genuine innovation in an industry that had been ready for disruption. As the last guests departed, Michael stood alone in the empty venue. From mockery in Paris to triumph in Chicago, the journey had been challenging but deeply satisfying. And like every championship he'd won on the court, this was just the beginning. Chateautrifi. Morning after the launch event, Michael Jordan awoke to his phone ringing constantly. News outlets wanted interviews. Retailers demanded meetings. Celebrities requested custom pieces. The fashion world that had mocked him was now clamoring for his attention. The first production run sold out in 3 hours, Maya reported during their emergency team meeting. Her eyes were tired but shining with excitement. Neiman Marcus is begging for more inventory. Bergdorf's has a waiting list with over 2,000 names already. Michael nodded, taking it in stride. He'd seen this pattern before with his shoes. Initial skepticism followed by overwhelming demand. Success didn't surprise him. He'd planned for it. "What about the factories?" he asked. "The specialized manufacturing process for flex-form fabric remained their biggest challenge. We're at maximum capacity," Tom Wilson, their production manager, admitted. "The 3 factories we've set up can't meet even 10% of the demand." Michael considered the problem. "Contact Phil Knight. Nike has manufacturing relationships worldwide. We need to scale up immediately." Within days, Jordan Beyond had become the most talked-about brand in fashion. Style magazines that had refused to acknowledge the collection now featured it prominently. Department stores that had initially rejected it now offered premium floor space. The most surprising reaction came from athletes, professional players, from every sport. Contacted Michael personally, expressing what the clothing meant to them. "Man, I've been stuffing myself into uncomfortable suits my whole career," wrote LeBron James. Then, the NBA's rising star. "Your jackets actually fit without needing custom work. This changes everything for guys built like us." Female athletes were equally enthusiastic. Tennis champion Venus Williams sent a handwritten note. "Finally, someone understands that athletic women need clothes that accommodate strength without sacrificing style." 6 weeks after the launch, Michael received an unexpected call from Phil Knight. "The sales numbers are unprecedented," Phil said without preamble. "But that's not why I'm calling. The impact goes beyond revenue." "What do you mean?" Michael asked. "Other companies are rushing to develop their own versions of FlexForm. Design schools are adding athletic-inspired fashion to their curriculums. You haven't just created a successful brand, you've started a movement." Michael smiled to himself. This was the true victory, changing the industry itself, not just succeeding within it. The movement continued to grow. Fashion design programs at Parsons and Fit created new courses studying the intersection of athletic performance and style. Nike's competitors scrambled to develop their own comfort technologies. Department stores created new sections dedicated to movement-friendly fashion. Jordan Beyond opened its flagship store in Chicago, with locations in New York, Los Angeles, and London soon following. Each store featured areas where customers could actually move in. The clothes before buying, shooting baskets, stretching, running on treadmills, a revolutionary approach to retail that other brands quickly copied. Maya was promoted to creative director, leading an expanding design team that continued to innovate. The original studio grew into a proper design headquarters employing over 100 added people. 8 months after the launch, Michael received an unexpected honor, a nomination for the Council of Fashion Designers of America Award for Innovation. The fashion establishment that had initially rejected him was now celebrating his vision. At the ceremony in New York, Michael sat with Maya and the core team, still somewhat out of place among the fashion elite. When his name was announced as the winner, the applause was genuine, if not universal. "Innovation often comes from unexpected places," Michael said in his acceptance speech. "Sometimes it takes an outsider's perspective to see possibilities others have missed." From his seat in the audience, he noticed several designers who had publicly mocked him now nodding in agreement. The transformation was remarkable. But the most significant change was happening outside the spotlight. People everywhere were experiencing clothes differently, expecting comfort and movement alongside style. The artificial divide between athletic wear and fashion was dissolving. "Your real achievement isn't financial," Phil Knight told Michael during a private dinner celebrating their success. It's conceptual. You've changed how people think about clothing." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "That was always the goal." Belmont thought I couldn't understand fashion. But what he really meant was, I couldn't think like a traditional designer. "And that turned out to be your greatest strength," Phil added. As Jordan Beyond entered its second year, imitators emerged. Competing brands launched their own movement-friendly collections, though none matched the technological advancement of FlexForm. Michael welcomed the competition, knowing it validated his concept. The most surprising development came when some traditional fashion houses began incorporating performance elements into their high-end lines. The industry was adapting, evolving, in response to the disruption Michael had created. Maya rushed into Michael's office one morning, tablet in hand. "You need to see this," she said, showing him a fashion news site. The headline read, "Belmont announces active couture collection." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Antoine Belmont is creating performance wear?" "He's calling it a natural evolution of his design philosophy," Maya read, barely containing her laughter. "No mention of you, of course." Michael smiled. "Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery." Yet even as competitors emerged, Jordan Beyond maintained its leadership position. The brand expanded into accessories, home goods, and specialized lines for different professions. Doctors, chefs, and others who needed clothes that accommodated movement during long workdays. The revolution Michael had started was transforming fashion at every level. The wall between athletic wear and high style had been permanently breached. Comfort and function were no longer sacrificed for appearance. Athletes were now welcome voices in fashion conversations. And it had all started with a moment of mockery in Paris, a designer laughing at a basketball player for not understanding fashion. Antoine Belmont could never have imagined that his attempt to humiliate Michael Jordan would lead to the biggest disruption the fashion industry had seen in decades. As Michael reviewed designs for the upcoming season in his Chicago office, he realized something important. Winning in fashion felt different than winning on the basketball court. This wasn't about defeating an opponent. It was about creating something entirely new, something that improved people's lives in a small but meaningful way. That was a different kind of victory, but just as sweet. 3 years passed like a whirlwind. Jordan Beyond had grown from a risky venture into a global brand valued at over $1 billion. Michael Jordan had successfully transitioned from NBA superstar to fashion innovator, proving his critics wrong at every turn. The spring of 2002 brought a familiar invitation to Michael's office. Paris Fashion Week was approaching, and for the first time, Jordan Beyond had been invited to present a collection, alongside the most prestigious fashion houses in the world. "They've offered us the prime Saturday evening slot," Maya said, holding the official invitation with its gold-embossed lettering. "It's the most coveted time slot of the week." Michael studied the invitation thoughtfully. He hadn't returned to Paris Fashion Week since that humiliating night with Antoine Belmont years ago. "Are we ready for Paris?" he asked. Maya smiled confidently. "We're more than ready. The question is, are they ready for us?" Michael laughed. "Let's find out." Planning for the Paris show became their focus over the next months. Michael insisted on creating something special, not just bringing their existing collection to Europe, but designing pieces specifically for this homecoming. "We need to honor traditional French craftsmanship while staying true to our innovation," he told the design team. "This isn't about revenge. It's about showing how far we've come." The collection they created blended flex-form technology with classic European tailoring techniques. They collaborated with a century-old French textile mill, incorporating their tissu, luxurious fabrics, into the high-performance designs. They hired skilled Parisian artisans to handle the intricate details that French fashion was famous for. "It's perfect," Michael said as he reviewed the final collection. "It respects tradition while pushing boundaries, exactly what fashion should do." As news spread that Jordan Beyond would show in Paris, speculation ran wild. Would Michael confront Antoine Belmont? Would the French fashion establishment embrace or reject the American sportsman who had disrupted their industry? Michael ignored the gossip, focusing instead on creating the perfect presentation. They selected a historic venue on the Seine River, a building that had once housed one of Paris's first couture houses. "We're connecting the past and future of fashion," Michael explained to reporters who questioned the choice, honoring traditions while creating new ones. 2 weeks before the show, Michael received a surprising phone call. The president of the French Fashion Federation requested a private meeting. "They're probably going to try to sabotage us," Maya worried when Michael told her about the call. Michael shook his head. "Let's not assume the worst." The meeting took place in a small café near the Louvre. The Federation president, Monsieur Laurent, was a dignified man in his 60s who had spent his entire career in French fashion. "Mr. Jordan," he began after they had ordered coffee, "your presence at Paris Fashion Week has created quite a stir." "I imagine it has," Michael replied calmly. "What you may not know is that it has forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths." Monsieur Laurent stirred his coffee thoughtfully. French fashion has always prided itself on innovation, but in recent years we have perhaps become too traditional. Michael listened with surprise as the older man continued. "Your work with Jordan Beyond has reminded us that true innovation often comes from unexpected sources." He looked directly at Michael. "The Federation would be honored if you would accept a special recognition during Fashion Week for your contributions to the industry." Michael was momentarily speechless. This was the last thing he had expected. "I appreciate the offer," he said finally, "but my goal was never awards or recognition." Monsieur Laurent smiled. "Which is precisely why you deserve it. You have changed fashion not for acclaim, but because you saw a better way." When Michael returned to their temporary Paris headquarters, he shared the news with Maya and the team. "It seems we've gone from outsiders to honored guests," he concluded, with a hint of amusement. "Will you accept the recognition?" Maya asked. Michael considered the question. "Yes, but not for me. For all of us who believed in this vision, and for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong in a world they want to enter." As the day of their Paris debut approached, Michael insisted on one unusual addition to their guest list: Antoine Belmont. The designer who had publicly humiliated him years ago would receive a front-row invitation. "Are you sure?" Maya asked when Michael told her. "After everything he did to try to sabotage us?" "This isn't about settling scores," Michael explained. "It's about coming full circle." The invitation was sent, but no RSVP came in return. No one knew if Belmont would attend or boycott the event. On the night of the show, Paris's fashion elite gathered at the historic venue. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. American athletes who happened to be in Europe made appearances to support Michael. European celebrities arrived in Jordan Beyond outfits, making their own statement about the brand's acceptance. Backstage, Michael reviewed final details with Maya and the team. Their models, a diverse group including athletes, dancers, and traditional fashion models, prepared for the unique presentation they had planned. "Someone just told me Belmont is here," Maya whispered to Michael as they prepared for the show. "To begin. Front row, just like you requested." Michael nodded, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Let's give him something to remember. The show began with a short film showing Jordan Beyond's journey from concept to global phenomenon. Then the lights dimmed, and instead of a traditional runway walk, the presentation began with a ballet dancer performing in a flex-form evening gown that moved like water with her graceful movements. Athletes followed, demonstrating the full range of the collection in dynamic ways. Olympic fencers dueled in perfectly tailored suits. Gymnasts performed in formal wear that accommodated their incredible flexibility. Models didn't just walk, they lived in the clothes, showing how each piece enhanced rather than restricted movement. The audience responded with spontaneous applause throughout the presentation. Even the notoriously critical French fashion press seemed genuinely impressed. From his position. Backstage, Michael could see Antoine Belmont in the front row, his expression unreadable but attentive. As the show concluded, Michael stepped onto the runway with Maya and the core team to take a bow. The audience rose for a standing ovation, a rare honor at Paris Fashion Week. In that moment, Michael locked eyes briefly with Antoine Belmont, who remained seated but was clapping slowly, a complex expression on his face. At the reception afterward, Michael circulated through the crowd, accepting congratulations and answering questions about the collection. From across the room, he spotted Antoine Belmont, standing alone, champagne glass in hand, watching him. After a moment's hesitation, Michael made his way toward the designer. The room seemed to quiet as people noticed the two men approaching each other. Many remembered the public humiliation years ago and anticipated a confrontation. Antoine straightened as Michael approached. He looked older now, his once black hair streaked with gray. The two men stood face to face for the first time since that fateful night. "Congratulations, Mr. Jordan," Antoine said finally, his French accent still strong but his tone neutral. "A most impressive collection." Michael nodded. "Thank you for coming." A tense silence followed. The entire fashion world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what might come next. Would there be confrontation? An apology? A dismissal? Instead, Antoine simply extended his hand to Michael. The gesture contained volumes, acknowledgement, perhaps respect, maybe even a hint of regret. Michael accepted the handshake, and with that simple act, a circle closed. He had entered the fashion world as a mocked outsider, and now stood at its center, not through vengeance or force, but through vision and perseverance. No words were needed. Sometimes, success truly was the best revenge. The Paris triumph marked a new chapter for Jordan Beyond. Fashion magazines hailed Michael's collection as revolutionary and genre-defining. Department stores worldwide expanded their Jordan Beyond sections. The flex-form technology became the industry standard that others desperately tried to match. 6 months after the Paris show, Michael sat in his Chicago office reviewing plans for their next collection. Maya entered with an unusual expression on her face. "You have a visitor," she said. "Antoine Belmont." Michael looked up in surprise. "Antoine? Here in Chicago?" Maya nodded. "He says it's important." Minutes later, Antoine Belmont entered Michael's office. He looked different from the arrogant designer who had mocked Michael years ago, more subdued, perhaps even humbled. "Thank you for seeing me without an appointment," Antoine said, his French accent still pronounced, but his tone respectful. Michael gestured to a chair. "What brings you to Chicago, Antoine?" Antoine settled into the seat, clearly uncomfortable. "I've come to tell you something I should have said in Paris, but couldn't find the courage." Michael waited, curious about what could have brought the famous designer all the way to Chicago. "That night in Paris, when Antoine paused, searching for words. "When I humiliated you, publicly. It wasn't a random event." Michael leaned forward slightly. "What do you mean?" Antoine took a deep breath. 2 weeks before that fashion week, I received sketches and notes from a mutual acquaintance. Early concepts you had been working on for athletic-influenced fashion. Michael's eyes narrowed. "I wasn't working on fashion then." "Not actively, perhaps, but you had ideas. Sketches you had shared with someone at Nike, who then showed them to me." Antoine looked genuinely uncomfortable now. "When I saw them, I recognized the potential immediately. They were raw, but innovative. A fresh perspective that the industry desperately needed." Michael sat very still, processing what he was hearing. "You saw my sketches before that night?" Antoine nodded. "And I was terrified." "Terrified? Of basketball sketches?" Michael's voice held disbelief. "Of what they represented," Antoine explained. "For decades, designers like me have controlled fashion. We've decided what's innovative, what's acceptable. Your concepts threatened that control. They came from outside our world, but showed a vision that could change everything." The implications of what Antoine was saying began to dawn on Michael. "So that night when you called me up on stage—" "It was deliberate," Antoine admitted. "I thought if I humiliated you publicly, you would retreat to your world of sports and leave fashion to people like me." He gave a small, sad smile. "I clearly did not understand your character." Michael sat back in his chair, stunned by the revelation. The mockery that had launched his fashion career hadn't been a casual insult. It had been a calculated attempt to keep him out of an industry where Antoine had seen his potential to disrupt everything. "Why tell me this now?" Michael asked finally. Antoine looked directly at him. "Because you deserve to know that your success wasn't accidental or simply a response to criticism. Your vision was always extraordinary, so much so that it frightened those of us who claimed to be visionaries." Michael processed this information silently. All this time, he had believed his entry into fashion had been sparked by Antoine's mockery. Now he learned that the mockery itself had been sparked by Antoine's recognition of his talent. "Does this change how you feel about your accomplishments?" Antoine asked. Michael thought about the question. "No," he said finally. "The journey was still the same. The work was still the same. The only difference is knowing you saw the potential before I fully recognized it myself." Antoine nodded. "You would have found your way to fashion eventually, with or without my unfortunate intervention. Your vision was too strong to remain unexpressed." After Antoine left, Michael remained in his office, reflecting on this new understanding of his journey. The story he had told himself of turning mockery into motivation wasn't completely accurate. The truth was more complex. His talent had been recognized before he had fully claimed it, had been feared before he had developed it. That evening, Michael walked through the Jordan Beyond flagship store in downtown Chicago. He watched customers, experiencing the clothes, moving freely, expressing surprise at the comfort, admiring the style. His original vision had been realized beyond anything he could have imagined. A young basketball player was trying on a Jordan Beyond suit, marveling at how it accommodated his athletic build. The joy on the young man's face reminded Michael of his own struggle to find clothes that fit both his body and his life. In that moment, Michael realized that whether Antoine's mockery had been random or calculated didn't really matter. What mattered was that he had seen a need, developed a solution, and persevered until he succeeded. The hidden truth changed the beginning of the story, but not its meaning. Antoine Belmont hadn't created Michael Jordan's vision. He had merely recognized it before Michael had the opportunity to fully express it. The vision had always been Michael's, waiting for the right moment to emerge. As Michael left the store, he smiled to himself. The journey from that humiliating night in Paris to revolutionizing an industry had been filled with challenges, setbacks, and ultimately, triumph. But the most important lesson wasn't about proving critics wrong or even changing an industry. It was about recognizing that sometimes our greatest potential is visible to others before we see it clearly ourselves. And sometimes, the obstacles placed in our path are not random tests, but deliberate barriers from those who fear what we might become. For Michael Jordan, success in fashion hadn't just been about revenge against a critic. It had been about fulfilling a vision so powerful that it had frightened the very gatekeepers of the industry he was destined to transform. That was the end of this story about Michael Jordan's incredible journey from being laughed at to revolutionizing the fashion industry. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to know what part of the world this story has reached. If you enjoyed this inspiring tale about turning criticism into success, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for many more interesting stories just like this one. Every like and subscription helps us create more content that inspires and entertains. Don't forget to share this video with your friends and family. Sharing stories about perseverance, innovation, and overcoming doubt spreads kindness and awareness. Everyone faces criticism in life, but as Michael Jordan showed us, how we respond to that criticism is what truly matters. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back next week with another amazing true story that will touch your heart and open your mind. When Michael Jordan shows up at the fancy Paris Fashion Week in 1996, he expects to enjoy the event as a basketball champion. But his night takes a terrible turn when famous designer Antoine Belmont calls him on stage and makes fun of him in ET8 front of everyone. Basketball player's style is not fashion, Antoine says with a mean laugh. You will never truly understand fashion. Instead of getting angry, Michael just nods calmly and says, "Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't understand fashion yet." But inside, his competitive spirit is awakened. Michael Jordan never forgets those who doubt him. Back in Chicago, while leading the Bulls to another championship, Michael starts a secret project with Nike. He's determined to create clothing that combines style with athletic function, something the fashion world has never seen before. With a young designer named Maya by his side, Michael begins learning everything about fabrics, design, and how clothes are made. As they work to create something revolutionary, no one expects that the basketball legend's next move will completely change the fashion industry forever. Michael Jordan stepped out of the sleek black limousine onto the rain-slicked streets of Paris. The summer evening air felt heavy with humidity as camera flashes lit up the night. Paris. Fashion Week 1996 was in full swing, and even though basketball was his world, tonight he was stepping into a different arena. "Mr. Jordan, over here," shouted photographers who lined the red carpet. Michael smiled and waved, adjusting the collar of his custom-made suit. Just 3 weeks ago, he had led the Chicago Bulls to their 4th NBA championship, cementing his place in basketball history. Now, he stood outside one of the most exclusive fashion events in the world. "Never thought I'd see you at a place like this," said a voice behind him. Michael turned to see his friend and fellow NBA star Charles Barkley, grinning widely. "Got to expand my horizons," Michael replied with a smile. "Besides, Nike wants me to connect with some of these designers. Something about building the brand." Inside, the converted warehouse space glowed with soft blue lighting. Models, designers, and celebrities mingled while waiters carried trays of fancy drinks. Michael recognized movie stars and musicians, but few athletes. He felt tall and out of place among the fashion crowd, but he kept his champion's posture. Head high, shoulders back. "That's him, Michael Jordan," he heard people whisper as he moved through the room. Some approached for autographs or photos, which he happily provided. Basketball might not be fashion, but he was still Michael Jordan. A woman in a sleek black dress approached. "Mr. Jordan, I'm Sophia Laurent with Elle magazine. Would you mind if I asked what brings you to Paris? Fashion Week?" Michael smiled his famous smile. "I'm interested in style beyond the basketball court. There's a whole world of fashion I want to understand better." "And who are you wearing tonight?" she asked, her eyes scanning his charcoal gray suit. "It's a custom piece," he answered, feeling suddenly unsure of whether this was the right answer. Fashion people always seem to know specific designers. "Interesting choice," she said with a polite nod, before moving on to speak with someone else. As the night continued, Michael observed the different styles around him. Some outfits looked normal enough, while others seemed impossible to actually wear in real life. He made mental notes of what he liked: clean lines, practical designs that didn't sacrifice style. "Would everyone please gather for the toast?" called out a voice over the speaker system. The crowd moved toward the center of the room, where a small stage had been set up. A thin man with round glasses and a ponytail stepped up to the microphone. People around. Michael whispered excitedly. "That's Antoine Belmont," a woman next to. Michael explained, noticing his questioning look. "He's the biggest name in fashion right now." His fall collection sold out in hours. Antoine tapped the microphone. "Welcome, friends, to our celebration of true fashion." His French accent made each word sound elegant. "Tonight, we celebrate those who push boundaries and understand the art of clothing." The crowd applauded. Michael joined in, impressed by the man's confidence. Antoine continued, gesturing with his hands as he spoke. "Fashion is not just about wearing expensive things. It is about understanding the language of design, the poetry of fabric." His eyes scanned the crowd and landed on Michael, who stood taller than most everyone else in the room. "Well, well," Antoine said, his voice carrying through the speakers. "We have a special guest. Tonight, Michael Jordan himself has joined us." The spotlight suddenly shifted, finding Michael in the crowd. People turned to look at him. Michael smiled and gave a small wave, not expecting the attention. "Let's have the basketball star join me on stage, shall we?" Antoine said, gesturing for Michael to come forward. Michael hesitated before making his way through the crowd. This wasn't what he had planned for the evening, but he was used to being in the spotlight. He climbed the 3 steps to the stage and shook Antoine's hand. "The great Michael Jordan," Antoine said into the microphone, looking up at the taller man. "Tell us, what brings a basketball player to our world of high fashion?" I've always been interested in style, Michael answered honestly. I think there's a connection between athletic wear and fashion that hasn't been fully explored. Antoine's eyebrows raised. Is that so? And what do you think of this season's collections? Michael paused. He hadn't studied the specific collections. I'm still learning, he admitted. But I know what looks good and feels right. Antoine's smile changed, becoming something less friendly. Learning? Yes, I suppose you would be. He turned to the crowd with a theatrical gesture. Ladies and gentlemen, here we have the perfect example of fame confused with expertise. The room grew quiet. Michael felt his stomach tighten. Mr. Jordan here thinks he understands fashion because he can throw a ball through a hoop. Antoine continued, his voice dripping with mockery. Perhaps next I shall design basketball plays, no? Some nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Michael stood still, his face a careful mask, hiding the anger and embarrassment building inside. Look at this suit. Antoine gestured at Michael's outfit. The cut is all wrong for his frame. The color, so boring, so safe. He made a dismissive wave of his hand. This is basketball player style. It is not fashion. More laughter now, growing bolder. Michael felt like he was back in high school, being cut from the varsity team all over again. That same burning humiliation. Antoine looked directly at Michael. Some things cannot be bought with fame or money, Mr. Jordan. Understanding fashion is one of them. I fear you will never truly get it. The room fell completely silent then, everyone watching for Michael's reaction. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him, waiting to see if the legendary competitor would lose his cool. Instead, Michael took a slow breath. He had faced tougher opponents than this man with his cutting words. He had overcome greater challenges than public embarrassment. Maybe you're right, Michael said finally, his voice calm and steady. Maybe I don't understand fashion yet. He emphasized the last word, yet. The same way he had said yet when people told him he couldn't win a championship. With a polite nod to the crowd, Michael stepped down from the stage with his dignity intact. But as he made his way toward the exit, his mind was already turning. The humiliation burned, but it was transforming into something else with each step. Determination. As he waited for his car outside, away from the crowd and cameras, Michael Jordan made a silent promise to himself. Antoine Belmont had just made the same mistake as every opponent who had ever underestimated him on the court. And Michael Jordan never forgot those who doubted him. The flight back to Chicago felt longer than usual. Michael Jordan stared out the window of his private jet, the humiliation from Paris still fresh in his mind. Antoine Belmont's mocking voice echoed in his thoughts. Basketball player style, it is not fashion. Michael tapped his fingers on the armrest. People had doubted him his whole life. His high school coach, who cut him from the varsity team. The critics who said he couldn't win. Championships. Charles Barkley, who once claimed Michael wasn't a complete player. Each time, Michael had turned those doubts into fuel for his success. This is different, he muttered to himself. Basketball was his world. Fashion was unknown. Territory. When the plane landed in Chicago, reporters waited on the tarmac. News traveled fast, especially bad news. Michael, what's your response to Antoine Belmont's comments? Shouted one reporter, as Michael walked toward his car. No comment, Michael replied, sliding on his sunglasses despite the cloudy day. His driver, Marcus, gave him a sympathetic look in the rearview mirror. "Rough trip, huh?" Michael nodded but didn't elaborate. He needed time to think. At home, Michael headed straight to his office and picked up the phone. He dialed a familiar number. "Pip, it's MJ. You got time to talk?" he asked when Pippin answered. An hour later, Scotty arrived at Michael's house. In the backyard, they shot baskets. On Michael's private court, the repetitive sound of the bouncing ball calming Michael's mind. "So, a fashion designer made fun of you," Scotty said, passing the ball to Michael. "Why do you care?" Michael dribbled, spun around Scotty, and dunked the ball with more force than necessary. "Because he did it in front of everyone. Because he thinks I can't understand his world." Since when does Michael Jordan care what other people think? He can or can't do? Scotty asked, retrieving the ball. Michael paused, considering his friend's words. "You're right. I don't." "Remember when they said you couldn't win without a scoring title?" Scotty reminded him. "Then you won both." Michael nodded, memories of past challenges filling his mind. Being cut from the Laney High varsity team as a sophomore. The Detroit Pistons beating the Bulls in the playoffs year after. Year before Michael finally led the team past them. The critics who said he'd never win a championship without changing his game. "You always turn criticism into fuel," Scotty said, echoing what Phil Jackson, their coach, often told the team. "This designer guy just filled your tank." That night, after Scotty left, Michael couldn't sleep. He went to his office and turned on his computer. The screen glowed in the dark room as he typed "fashion industry" into the search bar. For the next few weeks, between rigorous training sessions and business meetings, Michael researched. He read fashion magazines, watched designer interviews, and studied the history of athletic wear. He filled notebooks with observations about what athletes really needed from their clothing, not just during games, but in their everyday lives. One afternoon, Michael visited a high-end clothing store in downtown Chicago. He moved through the racks of expensive clothes, feeling the fabrics, examining the stitching. "Can I help you find something, Mr. Jordan?" asked a sales associate who recognized him. Immediately. "Just looking," Michael replied. "How do you know? Which pieces will sell well?" The associate seemed surprised by the question. "Well, some things are timeless, but mostly we follow the trends set by the major fashion houses in Paris, Milan, and New York." Michael nodded, writing this down in the small notebook he carried. "And who decides those trends?" "Designers like Antoine Belmont," the associate answered, not realizing the impact of the name. "They present their collections, and everyone follows." Michael thanked him and left the store with new understanding. Fashion wasn't just about clothes. It was about influence. And if there was one thing Michael Jordan understood, it was influence. The next day, during practice at the Bulls' facility, Michael noticed how everyone's movements were restricted by their clothing. The practice jerseys bunched up when players raised their arms to shoot. Even the expensive warm-up suits didn't allow full range of motion. "Something on your mind?" Phil Jackson asked, noticing Michael's distraction. "Just thinking about design," Michael replied. "Why hasn't anyone created clothes that look good and move well?" Phil gave him a curious look. "You thinking about more than just basketball shoes now?" Michael smiled. "Maybe." That evening, Michael called his agent, David Falk. "David, I need data on what athletes spend on clothing annually. Not just basketball players, all athletes." "This about that Belmont guy?" David asked. "I can get someone to research it for you." Also, set up a meeting with the Nike executives, Michael added. I have an idea I want to discuss with them. Over. The next week, Michael received the research he requested. The numbers were impressive. Professional athletes spent millions on clothing each year, yet very few fashion brands specifically targeted them or understood their needs. Michael saw an opportunity, not just to prove Antoine Belmont wrong, but to create something truly innovative. At home, Michael converted one room into a research space. He pinned magazine cutouts, sketches, and notes on the walls. He collected fabrics and studied how they moved, stretched, and held up to wear. He interviewed teammates about what they liked and disliked in their clothing. "Why are you so interested in this stuff suddenly?" asked Bulls forward Tony Kukoc after Michael questioned him about his custom-made suits. "Just curious," Michael replied, not ready to share his plans. Late one night, Michael sat at his desk reviewing his notes. Basketball had taught him that success required understanding your opponents, knowing the rules of the game, and then finding ways to excel within those rules, or change them entirely. He picked up a fashion magazine with Antoine Belmont on the cover. The designer looked smug, confident that his position in the fashion world was secure. Michael cut out the image and pinned it to his wall. "You said I'll never understand fashion," Michael said to the picture. "Watch me." The next morning, Michael arrived early at the Nike headquarters in Beaverton, Oregon. He carried a thick folder of research, sketches, and ideas. As he waited in the conference room for the executives to arrive, Michael felt the same focused energy that filled him before importanthood. Games. This wasn't just about creating some celebrity clothing line with his name slapped on it. This was about proving that an athlete could understand fashion and even transform it. When Phil Knight, the CEO of Nike, entered the room with the other executives, Michael stood to greet them. The same determination that had carried him through 6 NBA championships now filled his voice as he began to speak. "Gentlemen," he said, opening his folder, "I have an idea that's going to change the way athletes dress and the way everyone thinks about fashion." The champion's mind was at work, turning doubt into determination once again. The Nike executives stared at Michael Jordan with expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief. The conference room had grown quiet after his 20-minute presentation. Phil Knight, Nike's CEO, leaned back in his chair, fingers forming a steeple under his chin. "Let me make sure I understand," said Tom Parker, head of product development. "You want Nike to fund a fashion line, not just athletic wear, but actual fashion, created by you." Michael nodded confidently. "Not just by me. I want to build a team of designers who understand both worlds, athletics and fashion." "With all due respect, Michael," said a marketing executive with slicked-back hair, "athletes endorse fashion. They don't create it. That's not how this industry works." A few chuckles spread around the table. Michael felt a flash of anger, but kept his cool. This reaction wasn't so different from Antoine Belmont's mockery in Paris. 10 years ago, people said athletes shouldn't create shoes either, Michael replied evenly. Now, the Air Jordan makes Nike over $100 million annually. The laughter stopped. The executives glanced at each other, then at Phil Knight, whose expression remained unreadable. "The numbers don't lie," Michael continued, sliding a market research folder across the table. "Athletes spend small fortunes on clothes that don't really work for them. Regular people want to dress like athletes off the court. There's a huge market gap." Phil Knight finally spoke. What exactly do you envision, Michael? A complete line designed specifically for athletes that would also appeal to everyone else. Clothes that combine style with comfort and functionality. Something that bridges the gap between athletic wear and high fashion. That's been tried before, said Parker with a dismissive wave. It's either good sportswear or good fashion, not both. Michael leaned forward. Because no one's approached it the right way. No one's really understood both worlds. And you do? Asked a skeptical voice from the end of the table. I'm learning, Michael answered honestly. But I know what athletes need, and I know what looks good. The room fell silent again. Michael could almost see the calculations happening behind their eyes, weighing the risk against his star power, measuring the potential embarrassment against possible profits. Phil Knight stood up suddenly. Let's talk privately, Michael. In Phil's office, the Nike CEO paced slowly behind his desk. This is risky, he said finally. If it fails, it could hurt your brand, which means it hurts our brand too. Michael nodded. I understand the risks. Antoine, Belmont really got under your skin, didn't he? Phil asked with a knowing look. Michael smiled slightly. Is it that obvious? To me, it is. I've seen that look before, usually right before you destroy some opponent who trash-talked you. Phil sat down. But fashion isn't basketball, Michael. You're right. It's a different game, with different rules. But the principle is the same. Understand the fundamentals, practice until you master them, then find ways to innovate. Phil tapped his fingers on his desk, thinking, what do you need to make this happen? Michael's pulse quickened. A small design team, a discreet budget, and time. All things in short supply around here, Phil replied dryly. But maybe we can make it work. He extended his hand. You'll get your project, but keep it quiet for now. If it fails, we both pretend it never happened. And if it succeeds? Michael asked. Phil smiled. Then I get to say I believed in you when everyone else thought you were crazy. 3 weeks later, Michael sat in a small, unmarked design studio on the outskirts of Chicago. Nike had provided the space with the understanding that the project would remain top secret. No press releases, no announcements, nothing to risk embarrassment if it failed. Mr. Jordan, your 2 o'clock is here, said the receptionist over the intercom. Michael straightened his tie and opened the door to greet the young designer he was interviewing. He had already met with 7 candidates, but none had the right combination of skills and vision. A young Asian woman entered, portfolio clutched to her chest. She looked nervous, but determined. Mr. Jordan, I'm Maya Chen. Thank you for meeting with me. Michael gestured for her to sit. Tell me about yourself, Maya. I graduated from Parsons School of Design last year. I've been working freelance since then. She spoke quickly, her words tumbling out. I've applied to all the major fashion houses, but... She trailed off. But what? Michael prompted. Maya hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. They said my designs were too unconventional, too focused on function rather than pure aesthetics. Michael's interest sharpened. Show me your portfolio. For the next 30 minutes, Maya walked him through her designs. Unlike the other candidates who showed off evening gowns and runway pieces, Maya's work featured clean lines and innovative approaches to everyday clothing. One jacket had an ingenious system of hidden stretch panels, a dress transformed from business attire to an evening look with a few simple adjustments. Your clothes all seem designed to actually be worn, Michael observed, not just looked at. Maya nodded eagerly. Exactly. Fashion should serve the person wearing it, not the other way around. Michael smiled. That's what I've been trying to explain to people. When your team called me, I couldn't believe it, Maya admitted. Michael Jordan starting a fashion line? But then I thought about it, and it makes perfect sense. Who understands better how clothes need to move with the body? For the first time since the Paris incident, Michael felt truly understood. The fashion world thinks, I don't belong in their space. They're wrong, Maya said simply. The worst thing for any industry is thinking outsiders have nothing to contribute. Michael studied her for a moment, then made his decision. I need someone who isn't afraid to challenge the status quo. Someone who understands we're building something different. He extended his hand. Welcome to the team, Maya. What exactly are we building, Mr. Jordan? She asked as they shook hands. Michael walked to a whiteboard and wrote 3 words in large letters. Style, comfort, function. We're creating a new category, he said. And we're going to prove that an athlete can understand fashion better than fashion understands athletes. Maya smiled, already taking notes. Where do we start? Michael turned to face her, his expression serious. First, we learn everything there is to know about how clothes are actually made. Then, we figure out how to make them better. The secret project had officially begun. Michael Jordan was entering a new arena with a new team and a familiar fire burning inside him, the need to prove the doubters wrong. The old sewing machine hummed steadily as Maya guided fabric under the needle. Michael Jordan watched intently, noticing how her fingers moved with precise control, much like his own hands when handling a basketball. See how the tension affects the stitch? Maya explained, adjusting a small dial. Too loose, and the seam falls apart under stress. Too tight, and it puckers, limiting movement. Michael nodded, absorbing every detail. It had been 3 weeks since their first meeting, and he'd insisted on understanding every aspect of clothing construction before designing anything. Your turn, Maya said, sliding off the chair. Michael sat down, his large frame making the sewing table look small. His fingers, so nimble on the basketball court, felt clumsy with the delicate fabric. Take your time, Maya encouraged. It's like learning any new skill. After several crooked seams and 1 broken needle, Michael finally completed a straight line of stitching. He held up the fabric with a satisfied smile. Not bad for a beginner, Maya said, especially one with hands your size. The small Chicago studio was now filled with fabric samples, design books, and sketches. A bulletin board displayed their research schedule, visits to manufacturers, leather workshops, and textile mills across America. The next morning, Michael and Maya boarded his private jet for North Carolina, home to some of America's oldest textile factories. Michael wore a baseball cap and sunglasses, maintaining the secrecy Phil Knight had requested. Why are we starting with fabrics? Michael asked as they flew. Wouldn't design sketches come first? Maya shook her head. Antoine, Belmont starts with sketches because he expects fabrics to conform to his vision. We're doing the opposite, understanding materials first, then designing for their strengths. Michael smiled at the mention of Belmont's name. You're saying we're playing smarter, not harder. Exactly. Like studying game footage before playing an opponent. In North Carolina, they toured 3 factories, asking questions about durability, stretch, and breathability. Michael was surprised by how many decisions went into creating even basic fabrics. Most designers never visit these places, said Tom Wilson, a factory manager who didn't recognize Michael beneath his cap. They just order samples and complain when they don't work as expected. How do you test durability? Michael asked, examining a machine that twisted and pulled fabric repeatedly. We simulate years of wear in just days, Tom explained, demonstrating how the machine worked. But it's not perfect. Nothing beats real-world testing. Michael thought about his shoes, which Nike tested extensively before production. What if actual athletes tested clothes the way they test performance shoes? Tom looked impressed. That would give you data no other fashion brand has. That evening, in a small hotel conference room, Michael and Maya reviewed their notes. We need to understand leather next, Michael said, thinking of his own shoe line. Then, manufacturing techniques. Maya nodded, adding items to their growing research list. Most designers would be impatient to start creating by now. I'm not most designers, Michael replied. I don't take shortcuts. Over the next 2 months, they visited leather workshops in Chicago, button factories in New York, and zipper manufacturers in Los Angeles. Michael filled notebooks with observations, sketches, and ideas. Everywhere they went, he asked the same questions. How could this be better? What problems haven't been solved? At a high-end suit maker in Boston, Michael tried on jackets while performing basketball movements, shooting form, defensive stance, reaching overhead. "What are you doing, sir?" asked the confused tailor. "Showing you the problem," Michael said, pointing to where the jacket restricted his reach. Clothes should move with the body, not against it. The tailor nodded thoughtfully. In 30 years, I've never had a customer test a suit that way. Back in Chicago, Michael invited several Bulls teammates to the studio during a rare break in their schedule. He had them try on different clothes and perform various movements while Maya took notes. "This shirt feels fine standing still," said Tony Kukoc, stretching his arms overhead. "But watch. What happens when I reach up?" The fabric pulled tight across his chest, restricting movement. "See that?" Michael said to Maya. "That's what we need to fix." Late one night, after everyone had gone home, Michael remained in the studio, sketching ideas based on what he'd learned. His drawings weren't as polished as Maya's, but they captured key insights about how clothes could better serve athletes. His phone rang around midnight. It was Phil Knight. "How's it going?" Phil asked without preamble. "We're learning," Michael replied. "No designs yet, but we're building the foundation." "Some of the executive team is getting antsy," Phil warned. They expected quick results. "Tell them good things take time. My first signature shoe took years to develop." "Just make sure this isn't a wild goose chase, Michael. If you're only doing this to prove some French designer wrong." "It started that way," Michael admitted. "But it's become something more. I really think we can create something revolutionary here." After hanging up, Michael returned to his sketches with renewed focus. He knew the clock was ticking. The next morning, Maya arrived to find Michael asleep at his desk, surrounded by drawings. She gently shook him awake. "Did you stay here all night?" she asked, concerned. Michael stretched and nodded. "Had some ideas I needed to work out." Maya examined his sketches, detailed drawings showing how clothes might accommodate athletic movements while maintaining a stylish appearance. "These are good," she said, genuinely impressed. "Really good, actually. Not as pretty as yours," Michael said with a yawn. "But the concepts are solid. You're really starting to think like a designer." Michael stood up and walked to the windows, looking out at the Chicago skyline. "We've spent months learning how clothes are made. Now we need to start making them better." Maya joined him at the window. "Are you ready to start designing for real?" Michael nodded, determination written across his tired face. "I have a game. Tonight, but tomorrow, we begin creating our first prototypes. No more research. Time to build." "Antoine Belmont would be surprised to see you now," Maya said with a smile. Michael's expression hardened slightly. "He'll be more than surprised when we're finished. You don't mock Michael Jordan and forget about it." "This isn't just about him anymore, though, is it?" Maya asked perceptively. Michael considered the question. The project had indeed become more than a response to humiliation. It had become a mission to create something truly innovative, something that would bridge two worlds that had always remained separate. "No," he admitted. "Now it's about proving everyone wrong, including myself. Showing that an athlete can understand fashion better than fashion understands athletes." That evening, Michael scored 37 points against the Detroit Pistons, his mind still half-filled with fabric weights and seam constructions. As he drove to the basket for a powerful dunk, he noticed how his uniform restricted certain movements, more evidence that athletic wear needed reimagining. After the game, reporters thrust microphones toward him in the locker room. "Michael, there are rumors you're working on a secret project with Nike. Care to comment?" Michael just smiled. "I'm always working on something." The truth was, he was working harder than ever, learning a new craft with the same intensity he'd once applied to mastering basketball. The journey from mockery to mastery had begun. Winter settled over Chicago as the Bulls dominated the 1997 NBA season. Between games, practices, and commercial obligations, Michael divided every spare moment between basketball excellence and his secret fashion project. The small design studio had transformed over the past months. Dress forms stood in corners. Fabric swatches covered entire walls. Sketches and technical drawings filled multiple folders. A small team had joined Michael and Maya, a pattern maker, a technical designer, and a materials specialist, all sworn to secrecy. "We need a name," Michael said one December morning as the team reviewed their progress. "Something that represents what we're trying to do." "Jordan Fashion," suggested Greg, the technical designer. Michael shook his head. "This isn't just about putting my name on something." "What about beyond?" Maya offered. "Because we're moving beyond what people think athletes can do, and beyond what fashion currently is." Michael smiled. "I like that. Jordan Beyond." The team worked through Christmas break, developing prototypes of their first collection. Michael often arrived directly from games, still in his Bulls warm-ups, eager to see the latest samples. On a snowy January day, Michael entered the studio, to find Maya looking frustrated as she examined a jacket prototype. "What's wrong?" he asked, brushing snowflakes from his coat. "The shoulder construction isn't working," she explained. "It looks good, but when you raise your arms..." She demonstrated how the jacket rode up awkwardly. Michael studied the problem. "What if we approach this like my basketball uniform? The Bulls' jerseys have a specific cut that allows overhead movement." He grabbed a sketch pad and quickly drew what he envisioned. Maya's eyes widened. "That could work. Let me make some adjustments to the pattern." 3 days later, the revised jacket prototype allowed full mobility while maintaining its sleek appearance. It was their first truly successful piece. By February, they had developed 15 key pieces for their collection. Casual wear that wouldn't look out of place in a high-fashion boutique, but was engineered for athletic bodies and movements. "Time to show Phil Knight what we've been doing," Michael announced, checking the calendar. "He's coming to Chicago next week for the All-Star game." The team worked around the clock preparing their presentation. Michael insisted on perfection, rejecting anything that didn't meet his standards. "You're as demanding here as you are on the court," Maya observed late one night as Michael made them revise a shirt design for the third time. "Excellence isn't an accident," Michael replied, echoing what his college coach Dean Smith had taught him long ago. The day before their presentation, disaster struck. A pipe burst in the ceiling of their studio, soaking many of their samples and materials. The team scrambled to save what they could. "Some of these are the only prototypes we have," Maya said desperately, trying to dry a particularly innovative jacket. Michael remained calm amid the chaos. "We'll work through the night if we have to. The presentation happens tomorrow no matter what." And they did exactly that. The team dried, repaired, and in some cases rebuilt their prototypes. Michael stayed until 4 a.m., then went home for 2 hours of sleep before his morning practice. With the Bulls, the next afternoon, Phil Knight arrived with 3 Nike executives. Michael greeted them in a perfectly tailored suit that looked conventional until he demonstrated how it allowed him to perform basketball movements without restriction. "That's impressive," Phil admitted, as Michael executed a perfect defensive stance in formal wear. "But is it just a gimmick?" "Far from it," Michael replied confidently. "Maya, let's show them what we've created." For the next hour, the team presented their collection. Models, actual athletes from various sports, demonstrated how each piece worked. Michael explained the technical innovations behind each design. "We've developed a new sleeve construction that allows full range of motion," he said, showing the jacket they'd perfected. "And these pants have a hidden gusset that prevents tearing during athletic movements." The Nike executives took notes, occasionally murmuring to each other. Their expressions revealed nothing. "And this is just the beginning," Michael continued. "We have plans for formal wear, casual lines, and eventually performance gear that looks good enough to wear anywhere." When the presentation ended, Phil Knight walked silently through the collection, examining each piece carefully. Finally, he turned to Michael. "You've done more than I expected," he said. "But does it meet your standards?" Michael appreciated the question. Phil understood that Michael Jordan never settled for good enough. "It's a strong start," Michael answered honestly. "Not yet where I want it to be, but heading in the right direction." Phil nodded thoughtfully. "What do you need next?" "Manufacturing, partners who can handle our technical requirements, and a budget for continued development." "The budget I can approve," Phil said, "but the manufacturing will be challenging. These designs require precision that most clothing factories can't deliver." One of the other executives spoke up. "The costs would be prohibitive. These garments would have to sell at luxury prices." "So?" Michael countered. "People already pay premium prices for designer clothes that don't even function properly. We're offering true value." The executives exchanged skeptical glances. "It's interesting," said the marketing director carefully, "but not revolutionary. Athletic-inspired fashion has been done before." Michael felt a flash of frustration. They still didn't get it. This wasn't athletic-inspired fashion. It was fashion redesigned from the ground up for real bodies in motion. "We need something more," Maya whispered to Michael as the executives conferred privately. Something they can't dismiss. Michael knew she was right. The collection was good, but not yet undeniable. Not yet something that would silence Antoine Belmont and transform the industry. That night, after helping the Bulls secure another victory, Michael couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what was missing from their collection. At 3 a.m., he had a revelation. He drove through the empty Chicago streets to the studio, where he found Maya, who apparently couldn't sleep either. "We're approaching this all wrong," Michael said excitedly. "We've been trying to make fashion work for athletes. But what if we completely reimagined how clothes are constructed?" "What do you mean?" Maya asked. "In basketball, innovation doesn't come from making small adjustments to what already exists. It comes from changing the fundamental approach." His eyes were bright with inspiration. "We need to rethink fabric itself." As dawn broke over Chicago, Michael and Maya sketched a new vision: clothing with zones of stretch and stability like athletic shoes, fabrics that adapted to body temperature, seams placed to work with muscles rather than cutting across them. "This is what will set us apart," Michael said, looking at their new concepts. Not just better clothes, but a better way of making clothes. 3 days later, Michael requested another meeting with Phil Knight, this time with just the two of them. "I know what's missing," Michael said without preamble. He outlined his new vision, complete, with technical challenges and potential solutions. Phil listened intently, then asked, "Can it be done?" "With the right engineers, yes. Nike revolutionized athletic footwear. We can do the same for clothing." Phil stared out the window at the Chicago skyline. "This would require significant investment in research and development. Worth every penny if we succeed," Michael countered. Finally, Phil nodded. "You have 6 months to develop a prototype of this new technology. If it works, we'll back the full collection." As Phil left, Michael felt both excitement and pressure. 6 months wasn't long to develop. Something truly innovative, especially while leading the Bulls through another championship season. But Michael Jordan had never backed down from a challenge. As he returned to the studio to share the news with the team, his mind was already racing with possibilities. They needed a breakthrough, something that would change how people thought about clothing forever. 6 months? Maya's eyes widened when Michael shared Phil Knight's ultimatum. To develop an entirely new fabric technology? That's barely enough time. Michael nodded, understanding her concern. "Then, we better get started now." The next day, Michael expanded their team, bringing in a textile engineer from Nike's shoe division and a materials scientist who had worked on spacesuits for NASA. Their studio was relocated to a larger space, with proper equipment for fabric testing. "What exactly are we trying to create?" asked Dr. Patel, the materials scientist, during their first meeting. Michael grabbed a Bulls jersey from his gym bag. "During games, I notice how the uniform restricts certain movements." He demonstrated a shooting motion. "Right when I need the most freedom, the fabric fights against me." Dr. Patel examined the jersey. "Traditional fabrics are woven in consistent patterns. They don't account for how bodies actually move." "Exactly," Michael replied. "So what if we created fabric that stretches in different directions, based on where it's placed on the body?" The engineer, Tom Wilson, looked skeptical. "That would require multiple types of fabrics stitched together." "Which creates seams," Maya added. "And seams cause friction, irritation, and weak points." Michael thought for a moment. What if it wasn't multiple fabrics? What if it was one fabric with different properties in different zones? The room fell silent as the team considered the challenge. It's theoretically possible, Dr. Patel said, finally. But I've never seen it done. Michael smiled. That's why we're doing it. If it already existed, we wouldn't need to create it. Over the next few weeks, the team experimented with countless fabric variations. Some were too stiff. Others stretched, but didn't return to shape. Many simply fell apart during testing. Meanwhile, the Bulls were heading into the playoffs, and Michael's schedule became even more demanding. He would arrive at the studio after games or practices, often staying past midnight, to review the latest prototypes. During a crucial playoff game against the Miami Heat, Michael noticed how his uniform stuck to his body with sweat, becoming heavier and more restrictive. After leading the Bulls to victory with a last-second shot, he went straight to the studio with a new insight. "We need to address moisture management," he told the team, still in his game day suit. "The fabric needs to stay light and responsive even when soaked with sweat." Dr. Patel ran tests on various materials, measuring how they performed when wet. Nothing met Michael's standards. "Maybe we're overthinking this," Maya suggested one frustrating afternoon. "Maybe we should just create better versions of what already exists." Michael shook his head firmly. Antoine Belmont wouldn't be impressed by small improvements. Neither would Phil Knight. "We need something revolutionary." 3 months into their 6-month deadline, they still didn't have a viable prototype. The pressure was mounting, especially as Michael led the Bulls through another NBA Finals. After winning their 5th championship, Michael found himself with more media obligations and less time for the fashion project. Tom Wilson approached Michael after a particularly discouraging test session. "Maybe we should focus on designing great clothes with existing fabrics," he suggested carefully. "We've created some excellent pieces that way." Michael understood the temptation to settle, but it wasn't in his nature. "Keep pushing," he insisted. "The breakthrough will come." Late one night, while the Bulls were on a West Coast road trip, Michael couldn't sleep in his hotel room. He flipped through television channels and stumbled upon a documentary about spiders. The program explained how spider silk had different properties in different sections of the web, some parts stretchy, others strong and stable. Michael immediately called Dr. Patel despite the late hour. "What if we mimic nature? Spider webs have varying properties within a single material." "Interesting concept," Dr. Patel said, sounding surprisingly awake. "We could vary the tension during the weaving process to create zones with different properties." The next morning, Michael sketched his vision on hotel stationery and faxed it to the team in Chicago. By the time the Bulls returned home, Dr. Patel and Tom had created the first rough prototype of what they now called FlexForm fabric. It looked ordinary, but when Michael tested it, he could feel the difference. Certain zones stretched while others remained stable, working with his body's movements instead of against them. "It's not perfect," Dr. Patel cautioned. "The transitions between zones are too abrupt, and durability is a concern." "But it's a start," Michael said, energized by the progress. "Let's refine it." The team worked tirelessly for the next 2 months, improving the fabric through countless iterations. They solved the transition problems by creating a gradient effect between zones. For durability, they incorporated stronger fibers in a pattern, inspired by human muscle structure. With 1 month left before their deadline, they hit another obstacle. The fabric worked perfectly, but manufacturing it would require new machinery and processes that didn't exist. The production costs would be astronomical, Tom explained. No factory can make this at scale with current equipment. Michael's determination didn't waver. Then we designed the machinery too. When the team looked uncertain, Michael added, Nike invested millions to create the perfect basketball shoe. They'll do the same for this, if we prove it works. But as their deadline approached, even Michael began to worry. The prototype fabric was impressive, but they needed to show Phil Knight more than just a swatch of material. They needed a finished garment that demonstrated the technology's full potential. With 2 weeks remaining, the Nike budget ran out. Michael didn't hesitate. He funded the final push himself, paying for overtime work and express shipping of materials. 3 days before their presentation to Phil Knight, disaster struck again. The prototype jacket, which had taken weeks to create with the limited flex-form fabric they had produced, ripped during final testing. The seam construction can't handle the stress, Maya said, examining the tear. We need to completely rethink how we join the pieces. Michael sat quietly, contemplating the setback. Then he removed his championship ring and placed it on the table. What makes this ring special? He asked. The team looked confused. It's not just the materials, Michael explained. It's how they're joined together. The setting holds the stones without visible prongs or weaknesses. Maya suddenly understood. We need to bond the fabric, not just stitch it. Exactly. No seams where we need strength and flexibility. The EE team worked for 72 hours straight, developing a heat bonding technique that eliminated traditional seams at critical stress points. With hours to spare, they completed a jacket that showcased the full potential of flex-form technology. When Phil Knight arrived for the presentation, Michael was ready. He wore the prototype jacket himself. A sleek black design that looked like normal high-end fashion. Without explanation, Michael began moving through a series of athletic motions. Basketball shots, golf swings, sprinting in place. Notice anything? He asked Phil. Phil watched carefully. The jacket? It's not restricting you at all. Feel this, Michael said, offering his sleeve to Phil. Different zones have different properties. It's all one fabric, but it responds differently based on where and how it's stressed. Phil examined the material with expert fingers. How is this possible? Dr. Patel began explaining the technology, but Phil raised his hand to stop him. He turned to Michael. Put it on me. Michael helped Phil into the jacket. The Nike CEO moved his arms experimentally, then more vigorously. I've never felt anything like this, he admitted, genuine amazement in his voice. This changes everything. For the first time in the project, Michael allowed himself to feel true pride. They had done it, created something truly innovative that would change how people thought about clothing. Forever. We call it flex form, Michael said, watching Phil test the jacket's range of motion. And it's just the beginning. Phil Knight paced the conference room at Nike headquarters, the flex form jacket still on his shoulders. Michael Jordan and his team had just finished their full presentation, demonstrating how the technology would revolutionize clothing. This is the most significant innovation I've seen in years, Phil said. And that includes shoe technology. He turned to Michael. How soon can we go to market? We'll need about 6 months to develop the full collection and set up manufacturing, Michael replied. Phil nodded. Make it happen. I'll have the legal key. Team, start the patent process immediately. As Michael and his team left the meeting, they felt a wave of accomplishment. After months of grueling work, sleepless nights, and countless obstacles, Phil Knight had given them the green light. "We did it," Maya said with a tired smile as they boarded the plane back to Chicago. Michael nodded, but his expression remained serious. "We've convinced Phil. Now comes the hard part, convincing everyone else." His words proved prophetic. Within weeks of filing the patent applications, rumors about Jordan Beyond and FlexForm technology began circulating in the fashion industry. The response was swift and dismissive. "Another athlete playing designer," scoffed Harold Mills, editor of Style Quarterly, in a widely quoted interview. "We've seen celebrities dabble in fashion before. It always ends the same way, with marked-down merchandise." Michael read the article during a road trip with the Bulls. The mockery felt familiar, but he was surprised by how coordinated the criticism seemed. Meanwhile, Maya attended a textile industry conference in New York, where she tried to generate interest in their manufacturing process. She returned to Chicago discouraged. "No one would even look at our samples," she told Michael. "One factory owner actually laughed in my face." Michael listened carefully. Someone's working against us behind the scenes. "Who would do that?" Maya asked. Michael had his suspicions, but kept them to himself. "Keep pushing forward. We don't need everyone, just the right partners." In March, Jordan officially announced Jordan Beyond at a press conference. He demonstrated the FlexForm technology himself, moving with athletic grace while wearing a perfectly tailored suit made with the revolutionary fabric. The sports media responded enthusiastically. Athletes had been waiting for clothing that accommodated their physiques, but the fashion press was brutal. "Basketball shoes are one thing," wrote fashion critic Victoria Palmer, "but high fashion requires understanding subtleties that no athlete could possibly grasp." Most painful was when Vogue, the most influential fashion magazine, declined to cover the collection. "We feature designers, not celebrities with side projects," their fashion director explained in a polite but firm email. Major department stores followed suit, refusing to carry the line before even seeing the complete collection. Buyers who had eagerly stocked Michael's shoes were suddenly unavailable for meetings about his clothing line. During a particularly frustrating week, Nike's marketing team shared concerning survey results. Fashion influencers were actively mocking the concept on social media. "They're calling it air desperate," the marketing director explained awkwardly. Michael sat silently, absorbing the news. Maya watched him, concerned about how he might react. "It's like they all decided to hate us before seeing what we've created," she said. Michael's eyes narrowed. "This isn't random. Someone is coordinating this resistance." The next morning, Michael made a call to a friend who worked as a fashion photographer in Paris. "I need information about Antoine Belmont. What's he been saying about my project?" The call confirmed Michael's suspicions. Antoine had been actively speaking against Jordan Beyond in fashion circles, using his considerable influence to turn the industry against Michael. "He's telling everyone your technology is impossible, that it's all marketing hype," the photographer reported. "He's even threatened to blacklist any magazine that features your collection." Michael thanked his friend and hung up, a familiar competitive fire burning inside him. Antoine Belmont wasn't just a critic. He was an active adversary trying to crush Jordan Beyond before it launched. Phil Knight called an emergency meeting at Nike headquarters. The company was facing investor questions about the massive investment in Michael's fashion project. With the fashion world united against them, The risk seemed increasingly high. "Maybe we should delay the launch," suggested a worried executive. "Give the negative press time to die down." "Or pivot to just athletic wear," offered another. "Stay in our lane." Phil looked to Michael, who had been quiet throughout the debate. "Your thoughts?" Michael stood and walked to the window. Below, Nike employees played basketball on the company courts, wearing the shoes he had helped make famous. He remembered how his first signature shoes had faced resistance too, criticized for being too flashy, too expensive, too much about Michael rather than performance. He turned back to face the room. "When people tell me something can't be done, it just makes me want to do it more." His voice was calm but filled with resolve. "Antoine Belmont is afraid of us because he knows we're onto something revolutionary." "The fashion world has decided we don't belong," Michael continued. "But they don't get to decide that. I've faced skeptics my entire career, people who said, I wasn't good enough, tall enough, skilled enough, and I've proved them all wrong." The room fell silent as Michael's determination filled the space. "We're not delaying anything. We're not changing our strategy. And we're definitely not backing down." Michael looked directly at Phil Knight. "The fashion industry doesn't want to let us in. Through the front door? Then we'll create our own door." Phil smiled, recognizing the same fire that had made Michael a champion on the court. "What's your plan?" "Fashion needs to see what we've created, not just hear about it, not just read dismissive reviews." Michael pulled out his phone and made a call. "Get me Ron Harper and Dennis Rodman, and call Steve Jobs. I want to talk to him about our launch event." As Michael outlined his new strategy, the Nike executives exchanged glances. His plan was unconventional, expensive, and risky, but no one in the room doubted his resolve. Michael Jordan had faced industry resistance before and transformed the game. Now he was prepared to do it again. Maya caught up with Michael after the meeting. "Antoine Belmont really got to you, didn't he?" Michael nodded. "Some opponents you have to respect, others you have to defeat." His expression softened slightly. "But first, we need to get someone on our side who even Belmont can't ignore." "Who?" Maya asked. Michael smiled confidently. "I have a call to make to New York. There's only one person in fashion with enough power to change the narrative overnight." Next morning, Michael Jordan sat in his Chicago office, staring at the phone. He was about to call someone whose opinion could make or break designers' careers with a single word. Anna Wintour, the legendary editor-in-chief of Vogue magazine, was known for her ice-cold demeanor and uncompromising standards. She was also the most powerful person in the fashion world. Michael had met her briefly at charity events, but never in a professional capacity. Getting past her assistants would be the first challenge. He picked up the phone and dialed the Vogue offices in New York. "Anna Wintour's office," answered a crisp voice. "This is Michael Jordan. I'd like to speak with Ms. Wintour." A pause. "Regarding?" "A private fashion matter that might interest her." "Ms. Wintour is extremely busy. Perhaps you could speak with one of our fashion editors." Michael had anticipated the brush-off. "Please tell her it's about Antoine Belmont and a technology that will change fashion forever. I'll wait." 5 minutes of hold music later, a different voice came on the line. "Michael, this is Anna." Her British accent was precise, her tone neutral. "What's this about Antoine?" "It's more about what I'm creating that he's trying to suppress," Michael replied. "I'd like to show you in person. Just you, no press, no pressure. Another pause. You've certainly generated quite the controversy in my industry without showing much of anything yet. The controversy isn't accidental. Someone's working hard to make sure my collection fails before anyone sees it. And why should I be interested? Anna asked directly. Michael thought carefully before answering. Because in 30 years, you've never missed a major fashion innovation, and I believe this is one. The line went silent for so long that Michael wondered if she'd hung up. Finally, Anna spoke. I'm in Chicago next Tuesday for the Museum of Contemporary Art benefit. I could spare 30 minutes in the morning. Thank you. I'll send a car. Don't bother. I'll have my driver drop me at your office at 9 a.m. sharp. 30 minutes, Michael. Make them count. The line went dead. Michael smiled to himself. Step 1 accomplished. Getting her attention.